Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of From Page to Stage. I'm your host, Wendy Corner, and this podcast is for you if you're an entrepreneur. Yes, page, stage come together in entrepreneurship. And you may be going, I'm not an author. Are you? I mean, you may have a solo book out, you may have a contributory book out, you may have a regular blog. If you're an entrepreneur, haven't you got socials going out every week? What's that if it's not published work? Check that box. What about speaking? A lot of the people I work with go, oh, I don't do the public speaking thing. I'm shy. I'm an introvert. I can't do that. My question is, can you do a one-on-one conversation with somebody? Bet you can. If you can, then you can do a podcast just like we're doing now. So come on, let's talk. Let's have your message out to the wider world on podcast form. Okay, so that's the idea of this particular podcast. Now, I would I'm really excited to share with you this conversation today with the amazing Jeff Rubin. Now, Jeff and I have known each other for about that long. I know a little about him. Jeff knows himself very well. So I'm going to pass the baton over to Jeff and go, Jeff, tell us a bit more about who you are and how you've got to where you are today.
Oh, geez. Well, I started out in the newspaper field, and excuse me 1 minute, let me just scratch this out. I started out in the newspaper field, and I worked for community newspapers for a number of years. And at one point, I was living in Denver, Colorado, and my mother took ill, and she and my brothers lived in New Jersey. And all of a sudden, I discovered that I was becoming a long distance caregiver. And this was a major undertaking because most of us, and when I say us, people who are dealing with aging parents, find themselves in a reactive mode. They're not proactive, they're reactive. Mm-hmm. Mom broke her hip, now what do I do? Okay. Yeah. So even though I had brothers who lived very much near my mom, they really did not know what resources were or were not available for her. Right. So I will tell you that there were two books that started me on my journey into the field of aging and ageism. One book was a book by Ken Dykewald called Age Wave. And it was about the coming of the boomer generation, how we're going to change the dynamics of what it looks like to age. The second book was a book by a man who was very popular in the 40s and 50s. He even had a television show called Kids Say the Darndest Things, where he'd interview 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds and get some incredible reactions. His name was Art Linkletter. And Art Linkletter wrote a book called Old Age is Not for Sissies. Mm-hmm. And I learned so much from that book because what he talked about was that my parents' generation was very secretive, if you will. Mm-hmm. You know, they didn't want to share how they were doing with their children. I don't want to bother you, you know. Yes. And when they needed to know something, they would connect with others in their group to figure out and find. But even that is a question of understanding the maze that people go through when they try and get help and assistance. So I was fascinated by the whole experience of growing older and how we deal with it. And so I've embarked on it.
How old were you at this point? Can I just interject? How old were you at this point?
Oh, geez, when my mom took ill, I was probably about 35.
Yeah. And again, forgive me for interrupting. Around 35, we don't want to think about what's coming, do we?
No, we do not. And particularly if I'm, I was the youngest child. And so my mom and I got along fairly well, but we talked a lot long distance. And as much as I would try to give advice, I realized that it wasn't advice that she wanted. it was just to be heard.
Yes.
And I learned so much during that period of time. Because one of the things, I'll give you an example, Wendy, of what many people do without even realizing it. That we care so much for our parents that we become frustrated when they don't listen to us. We know what's best for you. Okay, they flip the script. It's no longer mom knows what's best. It's we know what's best. Okay.
Yes.
And we get frustrated when mom or dad doesn't do what we ask them to do. And all of a sudden, the temperature is raised. The voices are louder. Okay. And what happens is that person that's being talked to tunes out. They hear noise. They don't hear the words. Okay. And what I recognized is that really the crux of it was to take the time to listen and say, Mom, what would you like? How would you deal with this? Okay. And it's unfortunate when you look at this in terms of society. We are living in a culture of ageism, a global culture of ageism. So many people, I'm sure, on the call have probably experienced taking a parent to a doctor, and the doctor talking as if the patient wasn't there. They're talking to the child, okay,
Yes.
when they should be talking to the patient. And so we discount elders. We assume they have no say in their own health and well-being, and we just disregard the value that they bring to the table, whether we're talking about health or we're talking about engagement in life. This is the thing that many people are really caught in a conundrum, because we live in a society where we value younger people.
Yes.
And disvalue older people. But older, it's very interesting. It's a relative term.
Isn't it just?
Yes. I mean, in different industries, for example, if you're in high tech, if you're over 30, you're hard pressed to find employment. If you're in advertising, for example, if you're over 40, you're hard pressed to find employment. Many of the assisted living facilities and nursing homes are run by people in their 40s. And what they talk about is filling beds, not serving patients.
Yes.
Or residents. It's about filling beds.
To your point about the respect for older people, I've been traveling my way through Asia, and it's very different here. Because older people are respected. There's the acknowledgement of older people, and there's a real sense of you tell me. So it's fascinating, because I mean, I grew up in the UK, and yes, I've experienced the ageism. Age-related illness is what my father was told so many times, and having worked within the health system. We had cutoffs. We had 65, which were the elderly, the young old, and 80 plus were the old. And there were different gradations of the amount of services that they would be likely to access, because how long would they live afterwards? Was this an investment in the NHS's money? Commodities, really? So yes, I absolutely hear what you're saying. And it's also interesting to compare the Western way of looking at elders and the more Eastern, the Asian way of looking at elders.
Yes.
So there are differences, and it's lovely to avoid.
However, I will say that there is ageism in literally every country.
Oh yes, I'm not saying there isn't.
Or another. Yes.
Yeah.
But I understand the history, particularly the Asian culture, has been one of respect for one's elder.
Yes.
And that used to be the case here.
Yes.
And it became less of an understanding as we left the nest, so to speak. You know, I mentioned being a long distance caregiver.
Yeah.
I'm not alone. 1 out of 3 older adults are long distance caregivers.
We've moved away from the community where you knew everybody in your street because basically you were related to everyone in the street.
Absolutely.
The old adage of it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was genuinely what was going on. But now,
Yes.
as you say, we're disparate. We're all over the country, all over the world. And
Yes.
it's not.
But I will tell you, this is not just about caregiving. When we talk about ageism, for example, ageism, people think, oh, it's discrimination against older people. It's discrimination against anyone at any age, based upon the perception or misperception we have of that person.
Yes.
Oh, you're just a child. What do you know?
Yes.
Oh, you're not working anymore. You're not keeping up with the latest, or whatever the case may be. Or
those words that come in, prejudicial words.
Oh yeah, very much so. And so what I've always maintained is that the most abundant resource we have is human capital.
Yes.
And yet we consistently marginalize people at both ends of the spectrum, the young and the old. And so
then we have almost not only a dichotomy, we have almost an adversarial way of putting the two generations together, the elderly and the young. Because I mean, the young look at the old and go, what can you tell me? I mean, you've never experienced life without a phone. Or rather, how could life be without a phone? And the older guys are going, you can imagine what it was like before you had just a click of a switch.
Yes. Yes, I remember when people used to talk face to face to one another, you know, it carried on a conversation. That becomes
not
less.
Through this.
Yes. But what I find is that we devalue, as I said, older people for what they give, but yet give you an example. In my state, I live in Lexington, Kentucky, in that area. Grandparents are the primary caregivers for many of their grandchildren. Okay. Now, there is no acknowledgement that there should be support for the grandparent, but assume that the child is living with the grandparent because perhaps it's a broken home, or the parent has been incarcerated, or drug abuse, or whatever the case may be. What happens if grandma breaks a hip?
Yes.
Okay. All of a sudden, that child either goes back to the situation they were in, or even worse, be put into a foster home.
System.
Yeah. So recognizing the role that elders play is part of Older Americans Month, but it's more than that. It's and let's flip the switch again, and by saying that too many of us buy into what's being sold us as what it means to be old. You know, the term "I'm having a senior moment," you know, it's such a negative connotation, and anyone uses it. Okay. Matter of fact, I'm working on a project now to change the how we see a senior moment. Rather than it being something to poke fun at, it's something that we say, okay, I've reached this point in my life. Here's what I think. And here's a bit of wisdom I can share with people younger than myself. And so the goal is to give people the opportunity to be heard. And it's unfortunate, but one of the words that I hear over and over again when I talk to older adults is they feel invisible.
Invisible, yes.
Yes. And when you think about that, you think about how in a nursing home, for example, the average person might get one visit a year. Okay. The issue of isolation and loneliness. is major concern. I know in England, for example, they started a ministry to address isolation and loneliness. It's rampant. In our country, the Surgeon General called it the silent epidemic.
Indeed, yes.
And
it's been excuse me, I get my teeth in. Statistically proven that one of the biggest predictors of longevity is your friendship network. Even above things like the usual carcinogenic alerters of smoking, alcohol, and all of that jazz, loneliness even tops them.
Yes. Yes.
You were mentioning about Older Adults Month. We're recording, audience, we're recording this in May. This will not be published in May. So just to put a time space on that. So in America, May is Older American
Older Americans Month. Yes.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I want to take you back in time for a minute.
Sure.
When did you start to write? When did you realize that this writing, I mean, you mentioned you were in journalism, so take us back in time. When did you first get the idea that, oh, I can do well with this writing thing?
Oh, I was inspired by my mom, and it started when I was in grade school. You know, my mom would give me a topic and I would just write on it. You know, I would just write. And
was your mom a teacher?
I'm sorry.
Was your mom a teacher?
No, she was not. She was a salesperson. She worked. We were our family had two parents working, but she was very supportive of her children and very encouraging. And so I seemed to have a knack for writing, and she encouraged that. So yeah, and so I also used that as a way to get into, I guess, advocacy. I always felt that we need to stand up to hate and fear and prejudice, etc., and that one person can make a difference. You know, I'm working on a project now where I went before a Christian Muslim coalition of churches. And I firmly believe with what's happening today, the church has a major role, or can have a major role, in changing the course of discussion and action. But historically, it's very difficult, not just for churches, but for anyone to want to work together. We have turf issues, we have whatever the case may be. You know, it's not my idea, it's his, and you know, what have you. But my what I posed to the group was to say, look, if I said, I don't know what church, how many churches are represented here, but I said, maybe you have a congregation of 100 people, or you might have a congregation of 1,000 people. I said, what if your congregation could join hands? Okay, how wide of a circle could they make? Would it circle the church? Would it circle the neighborhood? Would it circle the community? And if we could bring together various denominations and various Black, brown, Hispanic, white, together in a positive message of we deserve equal rights, we're all equal in God's eyes, we can make a powerful statement. And so we're working on doing something called Hands Across Lexington. And we're starting to get some tremendous support for that. But, excuse me, what I find is that too many people of a certain age say, oh, I'm only one person, what could I do? Or, I've had these. I spoke to a group of retirees at one point, and I talked about a volunteer program. And I said, how many people in this room volunteer? And very few people raised their hand. And I said, why not? And they said, well, I don't know. I have nothing to contribute.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, there is a program here in the US called the Foster Grandparent Program, which matches older people with young people. So they can help tutor them, they can spend time with them, they can get a role model relationship going. And I said, you know, when this program was started, they did a study and they said, if that person did no more than show up, didn't have to say a word, just show up, they made a difference. And
Yes.
I'm saying, if you do no more than show up, you can make a difference.
People feel as
You
though
don't
they're
have to do anything large. It's what you do just in interacting with people. So,
yes, absolutely.
yeah.
So getting back to, so has your writing always been socially promoted?
Yes, very much so. Although for a while there, I wasn't writing. And it wasn't until a few years ago that somebody said to me, well, how come you're not writing? I said, yeah, you're right. Why am I not writing?
Mm.
And all of a sudden, I've made up for lost time. I've written a number of articles on different issues associated with aging, or issues in general. And I also wrote a book. And the book is called Wisdom of Age.
Right. Beautiful.
Okay.
Beautiful. When did it come
And
out? When did it come out, Jeff?
it came out in 2019.
2019. Okay. So
Yes,
that was
but
pre-pandemic. Oh joy.
yes, but let me tell you why I wrote the book.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, it includes research about where I would go into the schools and ask young people, and then I would ask older people. I said, I wanted to know how old that person was. I wanted to know their first name. I didn't know it. It didn't need anything more than that. How old they were. Did they know any old people? And what's one bit of advice they would give to somebody younger than themselves? The
Mm.
responses were incredible. I got responses from children as young as 5, all the way up to adults as old as 103.
Mm.
And what was amazing is the clarity of insight that the young children had and the older people had about life that people in the middle either never learned, forgot, or just lost their way. So postpartum mom, for example, who's dealing with self-esteem and body issues, learns from a 9-year-old about uh, having a different attitude about that. And or it can be the reverse. You're learning from somebody who is, you know, I one of the persons who at 100 said, I said, what's the advice you give to somebody younger than themselves? Don't sweat the small stuff. Now, after 100 years, that's pretty much a great statement to make, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
And
I
so,
mean, what you're saying there is, I mean, I did a live on this actually just this week, saying how many, because I got thinking, how many times have I missed wisdom because it didn't come in the package that I
yeah,
expected it to.
yeah, yeah.
I,
But
I
I will,
dismissed it.
yeah. But I will tell you that one of the reasons I said I wanted to do this is because the concept of who is old is a relative term.
Oh,
If I'm
yes.
5, 12 is old. If
Yes.
I'm 12, 20 is old, et
Yes.
cetera, et cetera. Okay. I have a friend of mine who's is 99. He calls me a youngster, and I'm 73.
Yeah.
So,
My
you know,
parents used to help with the old folks. And I said, okay, Dad, he's 85 at the time. What do you class as old?
hmm
Yes, that caught him up sharp. And I said, so
yeah,
how old are most of the people that you support? Oh, they're all younger than me. So they're
yeah,
elderly and you're not?
yeah,
Oh, it was fun
yes,
because as you say, it's all perceptual. All
yes, it
perceptual. And
is.
it varies depending on who you are and how you feel within your body and your age. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. It is proven that if you have a positive view of aging, that if you have to go in for an operation, you're more likely to be successful
Yes.
in what transpires.
Yes.
The studies have shown that on average you'll live 7 years longer. than somebody who has a negative view of age.
Yes.
And to be active and engage socially with people of all ages. You know, again, the perception that many of us have is that we think we know what older people want. For example, if you want to, we want to draw older people to our community, so let's build 55 plus communities. Well, I don't want to live in a 55 plus community,
No.
you know? And if I'm not considering all the options that are out there, I had a fella on the roundtable we did last month who has been, for the past 40 years, has been involved in transformational housing and is talking about, dozens of different ways that people can learn to live together and improve the quality of their life in the process. And so, you know, we can, going back to the book, I wanted to share the fact that the perception of when somebody's old is all over the map. But the other thing is to say that if we take the time to listen, we can learn from anyone.
Exactly.
At any age. And so that's the thing. But beautiful. Going back to the entrepreneurial piece, we're talking about people who, 60 plus is the fastest growing entrepreneurial population. Okay. 85 plus is the fastest growing age group. So we are living longer.
Yes.
We are being ostracized in the workplace. And so out of desperation, in many instances, people are looking to find opportunities to recreate themselves and start their own businesses. But there are too many people who have been inundated with this perception of age that they say, well, I couldn't, it's too late. I can't do this. You know, why? I'm just one. I can't. Yes. And they never take this step.
Yeah.
And
well,
I say
that's kind of the generation where you started with a company, you worked for them solidly for 40 plus years, you got your gold watch or whatever it was at the end of your service, and then pipe and slippers and you're dead in 3 years because your identity's gone.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Jeff, I want to stop you for a minute. We've talked a bit about the book. We've talked about the fact that you started writing at a young age and you've been involved in social activism through your writing. Can you tell us a bit more about your speaking? Because you're clearly somebody who's articulate and happy to share your message with people. Have you shared from big public stages? Has it been in small groups? Tell us about your speaking opportunities.
I've spoken to small groups and I've spoken to hundreds of people. I have not been on a larger stage. However, one of the reasons that I reached out to Speaker Connections is because I said, you know, what I'm engaged in is so significant in terms of raising the level of awareness that I need to be out there speaking more about the subject to, in many ways, a larger audience. To me, writing was a way to reach an audience. Yes. I've done local TV shows where I've talked about local issues and had a few thousand people that would tune in. But the idea of getting out there and speaking to large groups has not been in the forefront of what I've been doing. However, I will say this, and I would say this to any group that I would speak with. When I would look out at the audience and I'd start the conversation, I would say, by show of hands, I said, are there any old people in this room? Very few hands went up. And I said, by show of hands, do you know any old people? Every hand went up.
Yes.
And I said, therein lies the problem. We know them when we see them, but they're not us.
Absolutely.
And until we're willing to accept the fact that we are all aging, we're not thinking proactively about how we want to spend the next 30, 40, 50 years of our life. nor are communities gearing themselves up for that possibility.
As you were saying,
Back
that the
in,
fact that the demographic, there's an almost like a bubble of older people, excuse me,
yeah.
85 plus people. My cohort, excuse me, my cohort at university are coming up for retirement. And they're all talking about, I'm retiring. And I'm saying, I know what you're retiring from. What are you retiring to?
Right,
And the question
right.
always goes, what do you mean? I said, well, God willing, if you've been looking after yourself, you've got another 30 years in you.
Yes.
And they go,
Yeah.
oh. I said, are you going to literally sit and wait for death? What do
Yeah.
you do?
Yeah. Right.
So, yeah.
There's only so much golf and so much travel you can do.
And
What
that's
do you
if you've
do
got
with the rest of
the
the time?
funds to be able to do the travel, because so many
Yes.
people are now in the
Yes.
elder poverty bracket.
Yes. Now, it's interesting when there are a number of people who are engaged in raising awareness about ageism. And a lot of it is, you'll hear terms called anti-ageism. I don't like the term because I'm not against I don't want to be against something. I want to be for something. And so the people that I'm working with, and I'm working with a group called the Pass It On Network, which represents elder issues in 65 different countries. Okay. What the beauty of it is that the whole focus is on promoting positive aging.
Yes.
And addressing the issues that affect quality of life. And when you talk about quality of life, it's not quality of life for elders, it's quality of life for anyone.
Yes.
So now this leads into a very significant thing. One of the things that people are evolving into thinking about age and ageism is, first of all, I have friends who are involved with the United Nations and aging initiatives and what have you. The focus now is switched from aging rights to human rights. Now, that's more inclusive, okay, and more attuned with what we're talking about. Because when you talk about quality of life, it is about human rights to live in decency, to live with respect, to have opportunity to learn and grow and continue to be part of society.
Yes.
So I'm finding out that in other countries, they're doing more in terms of being creative and resourceful than we are here in the US, because we are very much in denial. And it's unfortunate. It just is truly unfortunate.
It's back to that, are we prepared to learn from other people idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we could go down the political road here, and I'm not going to.
Yeah.
The fact that wisdom can be lost if it comes in a package that we are not expecting or not prepared for.
Yes.
So we'll leave that one on the shelf for a minute. So Jeff, we've spoken about, you started writing at a very young age, and your writing has pretty much always been socially motivated.
Yeah.
You're speaking, you're happy to speak in front of people, and you're also very aware of the difference between the physical stage, where you can be effusive, you can talk with hands out here, and little Zoom room where you have a window. Excuse me.
Sure.
I think I need a quick drink as well. Excuse me, audience. We just go quick. Wet my whistle. Right. Okay. So we've talked about the book that came out in 2019. Do you have a follow-up coming up?
You know, it's a question of time to do it. I do want to do another book. I also want to take Wisdom of Age into a different direction. I'm thinking about this in terms of military families, and a bit of advice that someone can give to someone who is a veteran of the military, a wife who is a veteran a wife of a veteran, giving advice to people younger than themselves who are now experiencing what it's like to be involved with the military, et cetera, which is one aspect of it. But there are other things we can do. I'm also using the book as a way to promote community dialogue and intergenerational dialogue.
Yes.
Because, as I said, if we're going to address ageism, people now, aside from human rights being, elder rights being human rights, it also is that if we want to change a culture of ageism, it has to be started at the grassroots level and at the elementary
Absolutely.
school level.
Mhm.
And so this is an intergenerational issue.
Yes.
And so one of the things that the book is designed to do is to introduce people to one another, to say that, you know what, whatever point you are in life, you've experienced that, or you're experiencing it for the first time, but I can tell you what this means to me, and then you can tell me what this means to you. But anyway, you
I mean,
begin to,
the thing is that we never know how long along our life journey we are.
right,
So,
right.
I mean, somebody at 5 could be, as far as their life journey is concerned, old because they're going to die at 7.
Yeah,
So,
yes,
so that there is that element as well. But the
yeah,
reason I was
yeah.
asking whether there was a follow up, because I wonder how much of an impact the pandemic has had on our perception of aging, how we age as a population.
Mhm.
That would be a very interesting additional reflection.
Yes, it would be, but it takes it takes a self um evaluation, our willingness to go inside ourselves to say, you know, what is look, as I get older, I would say that my life has slowed down in terms of my ability to be aware of things around me.
Okay.
When I was young, you take many things for granted.
Oh,
But
yes.
as I get older, I begin to appreciate more and more, and I appreciate the moment. That's not to say that I feel like I'm gonna die tomorrow, although that very much could be true.
Who knows?
Um, what I do believe is that if we begin to live in the moment, we have infinite possibilities that exist for us rather than saying, I'll do that tomorrow, or you know, maybe next week I can take that on. But it's just,
Can I come back to your
yes,
phrasing there, slowing down? Now,
yeah.
isn't it interesting that when we hear of somebody beautifully adorned with white hair like yourself, and we
Hmm.
hear slowing down, the mind, I don't know about you, audience, were you thinking slowing down as in cognitively, or were you thinking of slowing down as in more mindfulness?
More mindfulness.
Absolutely. But
Yeah.
what I'm addressing here is perception,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
there may well be audience people who've been watching this and going, slowing down, he's immediately talking about getting cognitively slower.
Yeah. Yeah. No, no.
Just raising that again, a perception
Yeah.
thing, and how
Sure.
our language, how our understanding of language can and is filtered through our own experiences.
Sure. Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
Jeff, so we've talked about your writing, we've talked about your speaking, we've talked about this wonderful book and the opportunities that this has opened up for you and continues to keep
Hmm.
the the concept of aging positively, of aging rights, of human rights, of everybody working together at the
Hmm.
forefront. So tell me, how do you embody those words that you've written down when you take them from page to stage?
Oh, geez. It really is about what you talk about, which is being yourself, which is, you know, this is my, has been my experience, you know, because I cannot stand up there and say to you, okay, I'm here to tell you about aging, you know. No, I'm here to engage you in thought and conversation that allows you to rediscover what that means and
Mm.
what's possible. See, that's the thing. I used to say I feel like I was on the fence between people who think life is passed them by and people who have seen all the infinite possibilities that are still out there as we age. I have a friend of mine who's now 93 years old. She started the Passing On Network years ago.
Hmm.
Um, And her philosophy was passion and purpose, paid or unpaid, until the last breath. Okay. So it doesn't matter if you are being, I mean, sure, people would love to get paid for what they did. But more importantly, it's the need to be needed.
Yes.
And I can tell you, years ago, when I got into the aging field and I was involved in this program, the Senior Companion Program, I may have mentioned that earlier, but it gave low-income older adults an opportunity to help people who were frail, elderly, and adult disabled remain independent and in their own home longer. Now, you could say, how could someone who's a low-income person even think of volunteering? Well, this particular program was a stipended program, and they received an income, very modest, but it didn't count against their benefits, so they weren't penalized for making over a certain amount. However, I can tell you that people who came into the program because a friend told them about it and said, but they come in and they had very low self-esteem. And many of them couldn't look me in the eye. They said, I'm here because a friend told me and whatever. But I watched in a matter of weeks, they transformed before my very eyes because they had a reason to get up in the morning. They were helping other people who they called their clients. And they built relationships that lasted for years. Now, you talked about your dad and about perception of being old. We did an annual event where we recognized the value of older adults in this program. So I had a woman who was 93 at the time, and she pulls me aside during the lunch, and she says, now, Jeff, I don't want you to think that because we're having this to-do here that I'm ready to retire. She said, my seniors need me. Now, her seniors were 10, 15 years her junior.
Yes.
But in her mind, the seniors needed her.
Yes.
She wasn't the senior. They were the seniors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not old.
Yeah. Yes.
I know
So
people who are old, but I'm not old. You're as old as you feel. And as you said,
absolutely.
if you have that sense of contribution, that sense of service as well, then that gives you the sense of I matter still. I've got something I can contribute. That will keep me going.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I will tell
go on.
No, I was just going to say on this note, one of the things when they talk about positive aging, and there are many people who are in professions, for example, who are questioning whether what they're doing has meaning. So a number of them are looking to switch careers to go into social service or what have you. But what I find is that there are many people who are still searching for something they can do. And one of the things I'm having a roundtable next week with the former president of AmeriCorps, and we're talking about volunteerism and the various ways that people can contribute. And we just think, what could I do? Okay. You can do a lot. Just by showing up, you could do a lot. So anyway, that's my story.
I think that's going to be our final word of wisdom, isn't it? By showing up, you can really serve people.
Yeah.
And being yourself as you're doing it.
Oh. Yeah.
Jeff, thank you. Thank you so much for spending some time with us and sharing your From Page to Stage.
Thank you.
Bye from us.